Hello, and welcome back to Proverbs, a letter to my son. Today, we'll be looking at Lesson 3, Part 2. Previously, we looked at Part 1, and in Part 1, we saw the first two fools. There are three, and we saw the first two. We're dealing with Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And then the last half is the fool despises wisdom and instruction. We're going to look at that in Lesson 3. And as a review, we said that the second half of the verse, fools despise wisdom and instruction. We need to look at all three words. So in Lesson 3, Part 1 and 2, we discussed the fool. And in Part 1, we did discuss the first two fools. Now in Part 2, we're going to discuss fool number 3 and give a summary of the fool. And then after we're done here, we'll go to Lesson 3, Part 3, and there we will discuss wisdom and instruction. As I showed in the previous lesson, there are three types of fools. There's the 03684 fool, mentioned 49 times in Proverbs, one who only wants to have fun and is gullible, is prone to wrong choices. We saw that in Lesson 1. And the second fool, the 0191 fool, mentioned 19 times in Proverbs, one who's morally corrupt and doesn't have the sense to know better. And again, we looked at him in Lesson 1. Now in Lesson 2, we're going to look at the 05036 fool, mentioned only 3 times in Proverbs. And a summary of it, this definition is one who is mean, selfish, and closed to reason. We're going to end up looking at all three, and then we'll have a summary after we finish this section. The 05036 fool is mean, selfish, and closed to reason. I'd like to go first to the Psalms. Look at Psalm 53:1 and Psalm 14:1. Both of them say the same thing. They say, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." I've heard people preach that this really should say, "The fool has said in their heart, no God for me." A lot of fools believe there's a God, but they don't want the God of the Bible or Jesus Christ, and he's not going to let either one of them rule over him. So this is the fool. He doesn't want to be serious about God. Now, he may go to church, he may put on a show, but he doesn't want them ruling over him. Now, if you look at Psalm 14 and 53 compared to each other, in Psalm 14, the religious fool is one who lives like the world. He's a religious guy, but he's not saved. He's a religious guy, and he's going to live like the world. And in Psalm 53, it's a non-religious fool who lives for the world. If you want to see these side by side or in parallel, you can go to my website, jlsparaphrase.org, and there you can look at the combination of Psalm 14 and 53. It's an interesting comparison, and I believe that look at those verses is correct. I conferred with our former pastor, and he said, yep, that's a possibility. So there it is. This is the fool. That's the first thing about the fool. Now, I'd like to look at a summary of the fool. Isaiah 32:6 pretty much sums it up. It says, "For a fool speaks nonsense, his heart inclines toward wickedness, to practice ungodliness and to speak error against the Lord, to keep the hungry person unsatisfied, and to withhold drink from the thirsty." Let's take this verse apart. When it says the fool speaks nonsense, what is that? He doesn't have the understanding or discernment to say anything else. He's not a wise man. He may be intelligent. He may be able to get on Jeopardy and answer a lot of questions. But as far as life, he doesn't have any answers. And then it says, his heart inclines toward wickedness. Well, how does it incline toward wickedness? First, to practice ungodliness. He can't do anything right. He doesn't want to do anything right. He just wants to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. If it's good, fine. If it's not good, if it's wicked, I'm going to go there. That's the fool. He wants to have fun. To speak error against the Lord. And it's interesting that he blames God for all of his troubles. And he can't speak anything good about God because he doesn't know him as a personal way. To keep the hungry person satisfied, he wants it all for himself. to withhold drink from the thirsty. He wants it all for himself. This is the kind of person this fool is. Now, I'd like to give you an illustration. We're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 25, and there we'll learn a story about Nabal. David, King David, had been run out of town, and he's out there in the wilderness with 600 of his men, and he's running out of supplies. So he sends his men to Nabal's house to ask for help. Nabal's a rich man. And when they got there, Nabal said, "David? Who's this David? I don't know him. Get out, get lost. I don't have anything for him." Well, David's servants went back and told David what happened. And first thing David said was, "Men, gird your swords. We're going to go wipe this rascal out." So he's riding on his way to eliminate Nabal, and Abigail, Nabal's wife, finds out about it. Well, she hurriedly gathers a bunch of supplies, enough for the guys, and heads toward where David's coming from and intercepts him. And she said, "David, don't do this thing. Nabal's a fool. Take your supplies and go. Please, don't do this. You'll regret it." And David thanked her for keeping him from doing something he would later regret. But Nabal was a fool. He wanted everything for himself. He wasn't going to give any away. He's a mean, selfish man. And interesting part was, they went back to their camp. Abigail went back to Nabal, didn't tell him anything that day because he'd been drinking himself drunk, and he was stone drunk. She told him the next morning what happened. He had a heart attack and died. Yeah, that's what he deserved. Now let's look at some things about this 05036 fool. Psalm 74:18 says, "Remember this, O Lord, that the enemy has reviled and a foolish people has spurned your name." And then Psalm 74:22, "Arise, O God, and plead your own cause. Remember how foolish man reproaches you all day long." Notice, spurned your name, reproaches you. What does it mean to spurn or reproach God? The dictionary defines spurn as to push or drive away contemptuously with or as with the foot, or to refuse or reject with contempt or disdain. It defines reproach as to accuse of and blame for a fault so as to make feel ashamed. Therefore, according to these definitions, the 05036 fool rejects God, treats him with contempt, and blames God for all of his troubles. His mean spirit, coupled with an unwillingness to listen to reason, drive this kind of fool to detest God and blame him for everything that goes wrong. This is the kind of fool he is. Doesn't have any use for God at all. If you talk with him, he'll probably be resentful that you talk with him about the Lord. What else can we learn about this fool? He speaks harsh and cutting words. Proverbs 28:12, "There's one who speaks rashly like the thrusts of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." He speaks whatever he wants, cutting words. He doesn't care if it hurts you, but that's just the way he is. The dictionary defines rashly as to be hasty or not cautious in acting or speaking, reckless. This is someone who says whatever comes to mind without considering the consequences. It's unfortunate because it does a lot of damage. What else? He cannot say anything that is excellent or outstanding. Proverbs 17:7 tells us, "Excellent speech is not fitting for a fool, much less lying lips for a prince." The dictionary defines excellent as outstandingly good in its kind, of exceptional merit, or with virtue. A great orator will speak great thoughts because he's a highly learned man. But a fool doesn't possess that kind of knowledge or understanding. Therefore, all he can speak about are the stupid and senseless things that he knows. That's about sums it up for him. And since the fool does and says stupid and senseless things and hates to be corrected or disciplined, he does not have the sound understanding or discernment. Therefore, he is incapable of saying anything outstanding. You can tell a fool when you listen to him speak. It doesn't take long to find out because he speaks nonsense. What else can we learn? Well, he's this way because he will not listen to reason. He who sires a fool does so to his sorrow, and the father of a fool has no joy. Notice the first one is the 03684 fool, the one that just wants to have fun. The father's disappointed that he can't take life seriously. And the father of an 05036 fool is mean, cantankerous. He doesn't have any joy in that. Two occurrences in Proverbs chapter 30. Agur there is rebuking his two sons, Ithiel and Ucal. And their biggest problem, these boys, was that they were proud and arrogant young men. There are two verses in Proverbs 30 that deal with this fool. Occurrence number one is Proverbs chapter 30, verses 21 to 23. And it says, under three things the earth quakes, and under four it cannot bear up. Under a slave when he becomes king, and a fool when he's satisfied with food, an unloved woman when she gets a husband, and a maidservant when she supplants her mistress. But notice there, a fool when he's satisfied with food. Now, what do we know about a fool? He'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. He'll argue, and you can't win the argument unless you agree with him. But when a fool has eaten to his fill, what's left for him to do? Talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and you just can't put up with it. Augur's saying there are some things that people just can't put up with, and you're one of them. You guys are one of them. Now in occurrence 2, Agur finished his rebuke and encouraged the boys to recognize the error of their ways and repent, where he said in verses 32 to 33, if you've been foolish in exalting yourself, or if you've plotted evil, put your hand to your mouth. So he says, if you've plotted evil, if you look at the chapter, it's obviously that they've been foolish, and that they should recognize it. And he's saying, if you've been foolish, and you have, put your hand to your mouth. You ever seen someone go, what does that convey? That merely says that I've made a mistake and I need to fix it. So Agur is saying, if you've been foolish, put your hand to your mouth. Recognize your error and recognize that it needs to be fixed. Notice, put your hand to your mouth. We don't know whether these boys repented or not. You'll really like the discussion of chapter 30 in lesson 15. I love that chapter. I wake up at night sometimes. The logic is so deep, but it's absolutely beautiful. Now, what else can we know about this fool? He will walk into a disastrous situation without seeing the danger. Good illustration of that is 2 Samuel chapter 3, where King David is lamenting the death of his friend soldier Abner. He said in verse 33, the king chanted a lament for Abner and said, should Abner die as a fool dies? So how does a fool die? Simply put, he will walk to his death totally unaware that he's about to die. Now, how does that go? In Abner's case, he was a soldier, and he should have known that Joab hated him for killing Joab's brother in battle. Verse 30 of that chapter tells us, so Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother to death in the battle of Gibeon. Now, instead of being cautious and keeping his distance from Joab, Abner walked right into an embrace with Joab where Joab could thrust a dagger into Abner's midsection. Only a fool would walk into a situation like that. A wise man would never do such a thing. But this is the fool. He doesn't think. He moves with emotions, and whatever happens, happens, but he's not going to really think about it. So this is the 05036 fool, mean, cantankerous, and like other fools, moves on emotions. Now there's one more word in Proverbs, and it is the 0200 folly or foolishness. And it seems to be the special product of a fool. So it's not the fool, but it's the results of what a fool does. So let's look at some of those. Folly is all a fool can talk about. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spout folly. They like to talk about the things that they do that are the wicked things, the things that hurt people. They like to talk about all that. And it's the disastrous results of their actions. Proverbs 15:4 says, "The mind of the intelligent seeks knowledge, but the mouth of fools feeds on folly." Notice, teaching from another fool is the only kind of instruction he'll receive, and he will receive it eagerly. Don't expect anything else from him. He'll even give someone an answer before he has heard both sides of the issue. Proverbs 18:13 warns, "He who gives an answer before he hears it is folly and shame to him." Notice even the godly man David did it. In 2 Samuel chapter 16, Mephibosheth's servant Ziba came to David with a sob story about how he was supportive of David as king, while his master was glad David was temporarily removed from the throne. Without hearing both sides of the story, David told Ziba that all of Mephibosheth's property now belonged to Ziba. At a later date, Mephibosheth came to David to tell him the truth, but even then, David did not resolve it equitably. So, listen to both sides of the story. Proverbs says, "He who is first to plead his cause seems just, until another comes to examine him." What else can we learn? The results of foolishness are always detrimental. He will experience a premature death. Proverbs 5:23 says he will die for lack of instruction. In the result of his greatness, of his folly, he will go astray. In context, this is talking about committing adultery with another man's wife, but the principle stands true. If you commit immoral acts, you'll have to endure the adverse consequences of the results. All he will have to show for his wasted life will be a reputation of having created hurts, heartaches, and losses for himself and others. Proverbs 14:24 says, "The crown of the wise is their riches, but the folly of fools is foolishness." His foolishness will hurt all those who befriend him. Proverbs 17:12, "Let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly." His words and actions will generate costly and possible painful consequences. You would do well to stay away from him as far as possible. That way you won't be hurt because of him. Just stay away. There's no benefit in befriending him as a close friend, because the temptation is for you to become like him, and we don't want that. All right. The results of foolishness are always detrimental. Proverbs 31 tells of the virtuous woman, but there's a woman who is the exact opposite of her. This woman is heartless and destructive. Proverbs 14:1 tells us that the wise man builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her hands. This wife is bullheaded, thinks she knows it all, is cantankerous, and she will literally destroy her home and her family. They'll do it. Somewhere in time, the foolish words and actions of a fool will come back to make his life miserable. Instead of trying to figure out what to do differently to correct the situation, the fool will simply blame God for his troubles. Notice the verse, Proverbs 19:3. "The foolishness of man ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord." This is the fool, the 05036 fool. So we've seen all three fools now, and we've seen what folly is. So, having seen all of these, let's put it all together and look at the fool as a whole. Having seen what Proverbs and other selected scriptures have to say about this fool, let's make a general summarization. The fool is the exact opposite of a man who genuinely fears the Lord. For this summary, I will equate a man who fears the Lord with a wise man. And let's see what the results are. A fool lives for self, while a wise man lives for the Lord. A fool says whatever comes to mind, while a wise man ponders what to say. He's careful, chooses his words carefully. A fool lives for today, while a wise man lives with eternity in mind. Everything for the fool is today. Fun, 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 fun. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't plan for tomorrow. Whatever happens, fine. I just want to enjoy today. A fool loses his temper, while a wise man is patient. Do you lose your temper? Are you a wise man? Are you a fool? Hopefully you're wise. A fool is greedy, while a wise man is generous. A wise man loves to give, to help others, but a fool wants to keep it all for himself and spend it all today. A fool is mean, while a wise man is kind and truthful. A fool is foolish and stupid, while a wise man is wisely informed. A fool is unteachable, while a wise man is constantly learning more. Are you a learner? I hope so. Now, let's look at some practical applications with regard to the fool and folly. Now that we've examined the fool, all three of them, and folly, let's consider some practical observations and applications with regard to these fools and to folly. And let's see if you see yourself in any of these. A man who rejects God or the Bible or considers them trivial is a fool. There are many people in churches who go there to put on a show. They don't want anything to do with being serious about God, understanding His Word, or doing it. They just want to go for the show, make a feel good. A man who is unteachable or despises wisdom is a fool. A man who rejects or despises discipline is a fool. Do you allow people to correct you when you're wrong? You take it gracefully? I hope so. A man who lives only for today and the pleasures it can afford is a fool. Eternity is waiting. A man who does not respect authority is a fool, both parental and governmental authority and church authority. A man who rejects moral restraints is a fool. We need to obey the laws, obey the rules. A man who will do what he wants despite godly counsel is a fool. I've seen young people, men and women, marry someone that's not a believer, having been advised not to do it, and not too long later, divorce or something worse happens. But they won't listen. A man who is overly opinionated is a fool. A man who is quick-tempered is a fool. We need to control our temper, be patient. A man who has a mean disposition is a fool. A man who does not display a Christ-like attitude before his wife and kids is a fool. They're the ones we ought to be the most patient with the kids, and loving with our wife. A man is a fool when he sees the hurts and losses that result from his foolish decision, and then makes the same foolish decision again. Have you ever done that? I probably have, once. But remember, we're talking about people that do this on a regular basis. Be careful not to do that, though. Be careful. And then, a man is a fool who throws caution to the wind. A man who engages in an adulterous relationship is a fool. A man who does what the Word says not to do is a fool. We'll see in chapter 3, the last half of chapter 3 of Proverbs, how there are 5 commands that we should not do. And if we do these, God says we're a fool. Not just men, but God says we're a fool. So this is the fool in Proverbs. And hopefully you can learn from this. Hopefully you won't be doing those things that a fool does, but rather be good and godly in every area of your life and practice. If you'll remember, when we looked at lesson 2, we said there are 2 choices in life. We can choose the fear of the Lord and experience the blessings and gain that follow when I follow God's way. That was lesson 2. And then the other choice is we can live for the world. We can be a fool and experience the hurts and losses that result when I demand my way. And this is lesson 3. So now we have seen lessons 3, part 1, and lesson 3, part 2. I hope you'll join me for lesson 3, part 3, where we will examine wisdom, what it is and how you can find it, and what instruction is in the Bible and how it will help you. I look forward to seeing you there. Please join me, and I think you'll find it very valuable. I'll see you then. Thank you.